What's up everybody, how's it going? It's Burke, aka Daguerreo here, and welcome back to the Final Fantasy IX Attack Only challenge. We are heading deeper and deeper into this one, and we've made it quite far into Disc 3, and so without much further ado, let's continue the adventure and see how much closer we can get towards the end of this game. As always, thank you all for the support and continuing to enjoy and show love to this series. Please remember to drop a like if you are enjoying the videos, and with that, let's continue the story. The last piece of action I showed you guys was a win against Thorn and Zorn combining into Melty Gemini, and this again puts us quite deep into Disc 3, and we're going to continue to try and push forward. Disc 3 in this game is really big. There is just a huge amount to do. I would say it's probably the biggest disc. And so by the end of this video, we're not going to be at the end of Disc 3, but we're going to, of course, continue to make a lot of progress. So once we are done with that, we basically head back towards Lindblum Castle, and there's going to be a lot of story and a lot of cutscenes that we do not need to show for this particular playthrough. And once we're done, once again, we get a method of transport in the Hildegard 3, and we have the option to do a bit more side material before continuing on with the main story. At this stage, I was increasingly less and less motivated to do the chocograph stuff. I started the playthrough by trying to make sure I did every single chocograph the first opportunity that I had to do them, but basically, if I'm being honest, it hasn't been difficult enough to really necessitate that I do them at this point, and they're not really going anywhere, so I can kind of come back to them and do them if it's really necessary. So having a look at the Jagged Guide, it showed me a couple of things that are available now. So one of those things is to head to Quan's dwelling. If you go there and you make your way through, you can get a pair of running shoes. I didn't think it was going to be that important, but I thought I might as well pick it up. And so after grabbing the running shoes, I also decided to head to Q's Marsh, the ones that scattered around the world, and try to continue to get as many things as I could. At this stage, I already got the Bistro Fork, which was basically the best one that I can get other than hitting 99. If we make it to 45, we get Battle Boots, which I'm not sure are that important, but I'm just going to generally continue to capture them whenever I can anyway, just to continue to progress that side quest if I can. And so once that was completed, it was time to do a little bit of synthesis work. Now, I have mentioned a few times there was the synthesis trick, where you can synthesize cotton robes and then sell them for profit. And I cashed this in a couple of times, basically, especially once you have the airship, and you can kind of go around the world and pick up the equipment that you need. You can basically exploit this trick, and you can get as much gil as you want. So I didn't do it too many times because I couldn't be bothered, but it should have been enough for me to basically continue doing what I intended to do. At this stage, I also made sure I synthesized some more Medane's rings because of the elemental absorption that they offer. This is a good time to mention once again that I did make a mistake with reflect rings. I was hoping that the reflect rings had like a sort of innate ability to have reflect on them, but in this game everything really is about the magic stones, and other than any kind of elemental protection or absorption that they give you, it's basically never the case that they protect you against anything. And so the reflect rings were basically a waste of time, and so if you see me kind of synthesizing them or trying to build up my stock of them, it ended up being a bad idea. So if I end up having to drop the magic stone restriction, then maybe the reflect rings will come in handy, but at this present time they were basically pretty useless. It was a little bit too good to be true. Obviously, if I had reflect rings, then it would have protected me against almost all future like elemental damage and of any type. But at this stage, it ended up not being particularly useful. So that was one thing that I definitely didn't kind of research properly, ended up wasting a bit of time and gil and resources on. So the Medane's rings that I'm using to make the reflect rings are more useful to me than the reflect rings themselves in this particular challenge. So do bear that in mind as you continue to watch things moving forward. And so once I was done with my synthesis, I headed back to Treno once again. There's a couple of little things to do here. And at this stage, I handed in some more Stellazio, and I gave in Sagittarius, and according to the Jagged Guide, once you give Sagittarius, you should get the Rosetta ring, which was something that I wanted, but I only got 20,000 gil. So I was thinking to myself, wait a minute, what's going on? Why do I not have what I'm supposed to have? And the answer is because I skipped out on something that I was going to leave until a little bit later, and that is to visit Daguerreo. So from here, I had another look at the guide, and I was like, shit, I'm missing a Stellazio, and the final one is in Daguerreo. So from here, I decided to go there instead. And so I quickly jumped on the airship and made my visit to Daguerreo because it also contains some other useful stuff for this particular run. So let's have a look at that area and what I got up to. There's generally quite a lot to go through here, and most of it is just inventory related. There's not really any battles here and stuff that I'm going to engage in. And so the main things we're going to go over are the fact that I was able to get the Capricorn Stellazio, which was the one that I needed to get the Rosetta Ring, which absorbs fire damage. And of course, any kind of elemental absorption is going to be big for us in this playthrough. And so the Rosetta Ring was one of the more important things I needed to pick up. Now, other than that, there is a very good shop inside Daguerreo. Basically, it offers pretty much the highest level stuff that you can get at this stage. And so it was a good thing that I did all of that like cotton robe gil farming stuff, because I really ended up needing it pretty fast. So the synthesis shop here is pretty badass. Let's have a look. We have a weapon called the Sargatanis, and that boosts my attack to 53, so don't mind if I do. But I needed the Gladius and the Zorlin shape. So all of this kind of process I'm not going to show you guys, but obviously I wasn't going to leave Daguerreo without picking that up. There's just a lot of very nice options for you to get into. So as I say, I'm not going to go through everything individually here, but you're going to generally have an idea of the type of things that I synthesized and used here while I was in Daguerreo. So other than the synthesis shop, there are a few things that you need to do while you're in Daguerreo. So I spent a little bit of time obviously using the guide and looking around and speaking to who I need to speak to, progressing certain things and doing mini puzzles. And as a result, I was able to get to the weapons shop. And the weapons shop is of course useful because you can buy the Gladius and the Zorlin shape that you need in order to be able to synthesize the big weapon for Zidane. Once again, this weapon shop sells particularly good stuff, so I spent some time looking through, making sure I stocked up on anything that I needed for the playthrough moving forward. So once again, in the name of moving things along, we're not going to go through every single piece of inventory here, but just know that this area is generally very useful for picking up high level stuff that could serve you well for the remainder of the playthrough. And so once I was done with Daguerreo, it was back to Treno one more time, because now I had the final Stellazio that I was after. And as I say, you pick up a Rosetta Ring as a result. It would have been nice to be able to synthesize more of them at this point, but unfortunately I had to make do with just having one. But of course that's still going to be very useful for me moving forward. Other than the Stellazios, there's one other thing you can do here. We have the Knight's House Monster Challenge, and we can take on the next one, which is the Amdusias. Again, some weird names here. But it's another enemy that Zidane, even in this attack only challenge, especially if you have like the best weaponry like the Sarganatus thing, you should still be able to get through this one. So apparently, according to Jagged, this enemy has 6,578 HP. Let's see how much damage we're doing at this stage. 1,700, it seems a pretty healthy number. So can he survive 4 attacks? It seemed to use one of its attacks just to fly up there. But thankfully I can still hit. If it was too evasive and I couldn't hit there, we might have had a problem. But despite how cool this enemy looks, it didn't really get to do very much in this battle. It seems pretty slow, and it wasted a turn on trying to kind of fly/float up anyway. So hit me with a bio for 600, but it's too little too late, basically. And it's already game over. So if you defeat it, you get another pair of running shoes. Again, not sure how important that is, but I wanted to clear it out anyway, since I was already at Treno. So yeah, wrap things up there. And I think with that, I was basically ready to move along to the next part of the story, which is going to be Ipsen's castle. Let's go for it. Okay, my friends, Ipsen's castle. There is one thing that most players know about Ipsen's castle. It's something that on my blind first run I definitely did not immediately figure out. But the way that Ipsen's castle works is that because the entire place is basically like upside down / inverted, the same, like they did a really cool thing where something that happens in basically the game / world also applies to the mechanics of the game. And in this case, basically the lower the attack power of your weapon, the more damage it will do in Ipsen's castle. So before I went in, I tried to see if I could go around to the earliest shops in the game and buy like the earliest base level weapons for everybody. For party members that join later on in the playthrough, that proved a little bit more difficult. I think I sold a few of their original things, not thinking quite far enough ahead. So it wasn't completely optimized, but for whichever character I could, I tried to use their lowest attack power things possible. Now, throughout the castle, you will pick up the lowest level stuff anyway, if you progress far enough. But obviously, if you can head in with the lowest power stuff possible, you're going to have an easier time. So that was basically the main preparation I wanted to make for Ipsen's castle. And with that, we headed in to see if we could make our way through. So the mog shop here immediately already basically sells you the low tier stuff. And so I didn't have it for Freya, but thankfully once I entered it wasn't so bad. And I could immediately buy it from Kamul the Moogle and then equip the Mithril Spear for the lowest attack power possible. In terms of equipment, at this stage I was definitely getting some better options for my defense, magic defense and evasion too. Basically earlier on it was kind of the case that either I had to go for some kind of elemental protection that had a very weak defensive stats, or I had to go for something that was much more defensively powerful but that didn't offer me any elemental protection. But obviously the later you go in the game, the more things it gives you that has a bit of a combination of both. So thankfully, especially for the heavier armors, I did have things, for example, that protected against 3 different elements at 50%, but that also gave me good defense and magic defense. So definitely started to see some improvements in my armor at this later stage of the game. So I think what we'll do here in terms of the traversal, as always, I'll show you guys a few things here and there, but there's not too much to see in terms of the actual exploration of the castle. The other thing we will see, of course, is some random encounters. So we have some low-level stuff equipped, but let's see how much damage they're going to do to these enemies. So we have the Gargoyle and the Agares. Thundara coming in. And Steiner took a massive 1,100 damage there. So this really was the stage of the game where you're starting to see some really big damage. Now the Gargoyle obviously was not a good idea to tackle here. But Steiner doing massive damage because he has a very low level sword. But now that the Gargoyle is active, I'm hoping I can do more damage to it. But I was a little bit concerned with the damage that I was seeing here. Almost 1,000 damage again. And that miss was a bit rude. Aerial slash. Steiner's in trouble here. He just about managed to survive. But yeah, thankfully he's doing very big damage. But you're seeing here, even the random encounters, they have many thousands of HP. So I think we've done at least about 5,000 damage to that guy. And still alive. So probably about 6,000, 7,000 damage. And a clutch evasion there from Steiner. But the random encounters here are looking pretty tough. This is also pretty nasty. Steiner's been punished quite a lot in this one. Just have to hope Quina and Zidane can get the job done here. The one advantage is that obviously because things are so high level at this stage, we should hopefully be getting some nice experience points. So, you know, if we are lagging behind, if we're a bit underpowered for this stage, hopefully the experience will help us shoot up like 3 to 5 levels, let's say, throughout this section. Let's have a look. 14,000 experience. And yes, we did level up for both of them. Obviously, the experience got split between 2 instead of 4. That's why it was 14,000. But still, that's generally a pretty good number. But we have to be very careful. And increasingly, I was starting to become more worried about, like, do I have the healing resources to get through to the end of this particular bit? Because obviously if every battle we're taking like, you know, thousands of damage, then we're going to have to really burn through these high potions to be able to make it through. At this stage, I was, again, having a look, a lot of elemental damage happening. This black hood is just generally a really nice piece of gear. And we also have the shield armor, which I mentioned earlier, as having the triple elemental protection. And still a pretty decent protection. This Glutton's robe is really nice because it offers really good defense and magic defense, but elementally it's not quite as strong. But basically, thanks to the black hood, at this stage, I think regardless of the character type, we have good elemental coverage for everybody. So for the ones that wear the heavier armor, we've got the shield armor. For those who can't wear that, we've got black hoods that also cover 3 elements. Then, of course, we have our special accessories. We have, like, elemental absorptions available. We have, like, again, elemental, like, 50% reduction. So, basically, regardless of what we're facing elementally, we generally have some kind of counter to it. But that said, I'm still generally trying my best to keep everybody's power equipment on as much as possible so that when we level up, we continue to get the biggest strength and HP boosts that we can. So that is generally still that kind of balancing act, and whenever we have to face a boss battle, obviously then I don't have to think about that, and I can go purely for the best kind of elemental protection and preparation that I can. But for random encounters, it was still trying to find that balance, and sometimes sacrificing, let's say, 1 strength point to get, let's say, the black hood on there and get me some more elemental protection. So that's generally how I was playing it in Ipsen's castle. Thankfully, the encounter rate, as you're seeing at the moment while I've been talking, is pretty low, and so that's one kind of saving grace. If we were getting encounters every like 5 or 6 steps here, I'm not sure my resources would have lasted long enough to complete this place, but thankfully it's not been too bad in terms of the encounter rate. And so with that, I basically only faced 1 random encounter, and it was already time to face the next boss battle here against Taharka. This guy has a big 29,186 HP. So obviously as we move along, the HP amounts are climbing. Let's see how good a match we are for this particular boss. So curls up and becomes compact. When that happens, let's see. The Dan's already committed here. Only 45 damage. Which is not very good. And so I'm like, okay, I'll just wait. The ram attack does 1,276 damage. So, yeah, while it's compact, we are in big trouble, and there's not too much we can do. So I thought basically it kind of straightens up before it does the ram attack. I thought that meant that it uncurled, but it will tell you basically when it's uncurled. So I'm just waiting for it. So yeah, open comes in, and now we can do full damage, which is still not a lot, which was pretty concerning. Steiner with a critical 2,600, and Zidane doing good damage as well, thankfully. But then Blizzaga comes in, and everybody gets hit for about 300 to 500 damage. It's not very good. So yeah, my weaponry is not ideal here. Only Zidane and Steiner are able to do any real damage here, so I was not very happy. But Blizzaga kept coming in, and so as you saw from the previous attack, everybody took damage from this one. But I do have a way to deal with ice damage. So this first attempt, again, I didn't sort of study what this guy's moves were or anything like that, or prepare anything specific for it, but you could already tell that having some kind of ice protection or absorption was probably a good idea, because those attacks there are absolutely brutal. So if we could at least heal, then we'd have a better chance, I think, of getting through this one. But the damage output was pretty bad from Quina and Freya, which was definitely very worrying for me. So Blizzaga comes in again. And it's just a lot of damage. So Zidane being in trance is good. For future attempts, at least I know that there's a chance to get into trance and do a lot of extra damage here. But for this particular attempt, I was pretty much nowhere near. I landed 3 criticals, which was pretty insane. I think that was just random good luck here. But because I didn't have the right preparations before, I still got wiped out. But thankfully, it was only using 1 element, and so I thought to myself, there's probably a chance that I can mitigate this and protect against it for the next attempt. So let's take a look at attempt number 2 and checking out my options. So of course, the Black Hood doesn't protect against ice. Basically, I thought by having the Black Hood, I'd generally be protected, but I didn't realize that ice was one of the ones it didn't protect me against. But what we do have are Mundane Rings. As I said, Mundane Rings end up being more useful than the Reflect Rings. I basically made sure I gave everyone a Mundane's Ring. Yes, of course, you take a strength hit when you change it, but since we're not gaining experience here anyway, it's not a big deal, and the attack is more important. So there we go. That was already, like, that tweak alone, I think was going to make a pretty big difference. Since I'm only dealing with ice, I can basically move to any armor that gives me more strength instead. And so I think with that I should be ready. Like for example, for Zidane, I didn't need the black hood anymore because ice was the only element that I saw. So we can continue to boost our strength here. And with that, we should have a good chance. So unfortunately, yeah, as you can see with with Queener, I made a mistake. I did not get the fork that I was supposed to get. And so Queener, that's why they're doing such little damage. So that's not right. Should have had much less. But at least for the others, we have much lower attack stats. But I think because Freya comes into the party later, I think her weakest weapon is already an 18. So that's why, even though she has a weak weapon, she's not doing as much damage as, say, Steiner, who's able to do a lot more. But let's see, with the Medane Rings and Ice Absorption, how are we going to fare? Alright, here we go. So I'm waiting once again. This time we go straight in with Blizzaga, so it's not curling up and becoming compact. So that means we can just go for it. And look at that healing. Ooh, that healing was huge. Now, Freya is generally quite underleveled here. You can see, I mean, she literally has a quarter of the HP that Zidane has. And moving forward, that's something I'm going to try to kind of balance out a little more. But for now, I thought as long as I can keep getting through, there's no point trying to, like, you know, specifically farm for experience points for Freya. We'll do it when it's necessary. Now, thankfully, it didn't stay curled up for too long. But Queen is just doing terrible damage. I should have just moved them to back row so they can tank a little bit more, because they're not helping in terms of the damage. Yeah, Chop only did 600 this time, which was much better. Nice critical there. But 29,000 is a pretty significant number. So it's going to take us a little while still, but thankfully the Medane's Rings really saved the day here. I think if you're a bit unlucky and it does say Ram or Chop on Freya, or it does it multiple times on Queener or Steiner, then you're going to get some KOs in this fight. But thanks to the healing ability of Blizzaga, we should be relatively safe here. So we have to be patient here, just wait until it comes back out of its curled state. Yeah, that Ram is just a lot of damage here. So this is the only risk that we have. If we just get bad RNG and it stays curled for a very long time, and it does say 8 Ram attacks in a row, then yes, you're going to be in trouble. But we just have to kind of wait and see. So 3 Rams in a row, but Freya had a clutch dodge there. She might have got KO'd. That's Ram number 4. Thankfully it missed again. I just attacked here with Queener, just hoping that maybe if you attack it, it kind of comes out of its form, but not the case, and there you go, Freya did get KO. So this was some bad RNG here. 5 Rams in a row. 6 Rams in a row. Thankfully another one missed. But I was just, at this stage I was like, come on man, like let me through. No Blizzagas being used either. 7 Rams in a row. I was like, come on, I figured this fight out. I got the Medane's Rings, just let me win. Like, now you're just being an arsehole. You know that I figured this fight out, and you're just giving me this really shitty, annoying troll RNG to stop me from winning here. Like, the amount of time is spent in this curled state here, just ramming over and over and over again. It's really annoying. But I was staying patient. Obviously, there's nothing I can do here. There's no point continuing to attack here. But yeah, it's funny because the battle looks so safe in the beginning. But this is how RNG can be your undoing here. It just refused. It just refused to leave its curled up state. It literally, I think, I stopped counting even for the voiceover. I think it got like 10 Rams or 12 Rams or something like that. And so yes, I actually failed my second attempt as well. So that was really annoying. I was like, oh come on, now you open up after like 50 Rams in a row. But yeah, if Queener could have done like legit damage, like 1,000 or something, 1,500, Queener could have probably soloed the rest of this. But of course, it had to be the one character that couldn't do it. because of their weapon. And so yeah, I'm going to skip forward to the next thing. Okay, hopefully third time is the charm. Curled up very quickly. I thought to myself, maybe the attempt where it curled up less, like that was the good RNG, and maybe this is just an enemy that spends like 80-90% of the fight curled up, and we just have to wait for a good opportunity here. But I did equip some stuff this time that gave me a little bit better evasion. I tried to see if I could kind of really lean in on those rams missing, and you saw 2 in a row missing there, which was good. So there's a couple of armlets that give you less strength than the bone armlet, but they give you a little bit better evasion. So I think my evasion was in the 20s for everybody here. Okay, so this time it opened up much more quickly, and now it's time for the onslaught, and we just have to hope that it doesn't close up again very fast. Yeah, at this stage I sped everything up because obviously it's clear what's going to happen here. I've already had a couple of attempts. Curled back up again, forced to wait. I did move Queener to the back row, as you would have noticed here. I figured they're not doing damage anyway. And for the second time, thankfully, it didn't do ram too many times, and it healed everybody up as well. So I thought, okay, this time I think we've got the right kind of setup here. The chop's doing way less damage as well. Back row. The Zaga healing up. So this is how the second attempt should have gone. And now we have to wait one more time. Those rams are still painful, man. 1,000 damage. And at this stage I have, I think, pretty good armors, so just have to deal with it. But thankfully after one ram it opened up again, and this time surely I should be able to put an end to this fight. Trance is coming too, but he didn't get hit there, so it ended up not triggering Trance. It's funny, I got Trance in the first attempt, but the subsequent 2 I haven't got them so far. Is it going to happen? I must be close. But as you can see, 29,000 is quite a lot at this stage. Yeah, I was getting a bit tired now. Speed up again, and there we go. Okay, so it took 3 attempts. I think it should have taken 2 because of the bad RNG in attempt 2. But we managed to get the job done, and that was the main boss of Ipsen's castle at this stage, which means we can continue forward with the story. So there's a few more things to do here, like your time in Ipsen's castle is not quite over. There's a few more things you can pick up, like for example the Maiden Prayer. I don't think it's going to be particularly important for this run, but again I'm trying to pick up everything that I can just in case, like there's some weird situation in which it might help me. So I continue to make my way through and pick up everything that I could, and eventually you find Amarant, and then you are able to continue on with the story once more. The one thing I will show is that when you go back in to get Amarant, you can get into an encounter with just Zidane and Amarant versus the enemies. Now you've seen that they can do a lot of damage and they have a lot of health, so let's see if the 2 of them together can do enough still to get through an encounter like this one. 1,342 damage, and I had the wrong weapon equipped for Amarant because I just literally got him back. And because the encounter rate is so low, I thought to myself I can still probably get out of here. I'll be okay. But that was a big mistake, and I got annihilated. So that was a bit of a mistake there. But thankfully, like there's a lot of save opportunities here because you've got the Moogle to save, and you have the auto-save function of the Steam version of the game. So it didn't end up being a big deal, but obviously you need to be careful with that stuff. So that was the final thing that I wanted to show from Ipsen's castle. And from there you are back on the airship and have the freedom once again to explore. Once again, I didn't bother too much in terms of side material. I just did enough frog catching to get myself the battle boots and continue that general quest. But other than that, I was very much invested in moving on with the story and starting to head towards the shrines. Now, this is a part of the game where they basically are going to have Queener assisting Zidane. So we need to make sure that Quina is equipped with the best stuff that we have and make sure we are prepared for battle with the two of them together. Now, honestly, at this stage, it had been so long since I did this part of the game that I totally forgot if we were going to get a boss battle at each of the different shrines. And so I spent some time preparing everyone for battles that would happen in the shrines. Turns out that that wasn't the case. You send everybody to the specific shrines, and the only one in which you have an actual battle is going to be the Earth Shrine, where Zidane and Quina will go. Now, this is one where, again, the guide kind of steered me wrong a little bit. Now, it's partly the guide's fault, and partly just the game being a bit of a troll. The place where Zidane and Quina will go is called the Earth Shrine, and you'll be fighting a boss called the Earth Guardian. So, pop quiz. Which element do you think you should protect yourself against in the Earth Shrine against the Earth Guardian? If you answered Earth, you are wrong, because basically you're going to see how the boss battle plays out, and you're going to realize that Earth protection is not as useful as everything would imply. So in my first attempt, I basically prepped these two with anything that could protect against Earth elemental damage. And so what I will do here is I will obviously skip kind of visiting each shrine, and we'll head straight towards the Earth Shrine and the Earth Guardian boss battle, because this one was a little bit tough. It has 20,756 HP, which for a 2-character battle is very high. So that definitely scared me a little bit. In comes the double slash, and it does 1,200 damage. But you're going to see that Zidane is going to, A, do 1,600 damage, which is not bad, but 2, that his trance gauge is almost full. So thanks to not needing it against Taharka, we have a trance gauge that is going to be filled in this fight that we can use. But comes in with Fire and does 1,200 damage. So Zidane has a lot of HP, but already in 2 moves he's almost dead. So the damage was very frightening here. And it came in with a fire element. So the Earth Guardian came in with a Fire, but very good damage from Quina. And then next up is Blizzaga. So remember, we are in the Earth Shrine, and we're facing the Earth Guardian, and we've been hit with fire and ice. Another one, 2,500. This is really good. I mean, that's really solid damage, but Quina let us down a bit. Then comes Thundaga. So the 3 elements we've faced so far, none of them are Earth. Excellent. Zidane is dead, and I thought to myself, we are in trouble here. 58 damage, excellent work. Quina had an absolutely horrible RNG here, and then just rotated back round to fire. So I was like, what? I come in with my like Gaia gear or whatever, and I'm like, yeah, I'm ready to absorb Earth Elemental protection because I'm facing the Earth Guardian. And then that happens, and I was like, that's just such bullshit. So unfortunately, if you press continue, you don't get to change your equipment. I think you head straight into the fight, and so I had to load an earlier save to prepare myself properly for this one. So I did a little test with continue just in case, but it does take you straight to the fight once again. But I wanted to give it one more go while I'm here, just to see, like, is there any Earth Elemental that I have to worry about here? Comes in with a Blizzaga, Thundaga. I'm like, is there any Earth attack at all? It's so strange, like, for an Earth Guardian to basically almost never use any Earth attacks. It's really, really weird. I think it does have an Earth attack in its arsenal, but it seems to use it rarely enough that you're probably better off protecting against the other elements instead. So, yeah, with this one I had to go back to the drawing board. I had to load an earlier save and prepare once again for battle. Obviously, I was seeing fire, thunder, and ice, but with my accessories, I can only absorb 1 at a time. Now, the damage is so big, I was thinking that if I try to do something that kind of reduces it by 50%, like, for example, equipping this ribbon, it's still like 600 per hit. And I'm thinking, like, absorption, even though it's a 1 in maybe 3 or 1 in 4 chance that actually works, the absorption would be really powerful, so maybe it's a good idea. So at this stage, I had a lot of, like, individual options where it was like you can absorb 1 element, and then you could combo that with, say, a Black Hood, where you could reduce 3 elements by 50% and absorb the 4th one. And so it's just this sort of juggling act of trying to cover as many elements as possible. And once again, this is why I think this particular challenge and Final Fantasy IX is quote-unquote easier than the ones I've done so far, because despite the heavy restrictions, the fact that these pieces of equipment offer you like inherent elemental protection, that makes a huge difference. Like if you weren't allowed to, for example, I don't know, change equipment or something, or none of the equipment offered elemental protection, I think this challenge would have ended a long time ago, because obviously the ability to either reduce elemental damage or to absorb it is huge for these types of challenges. And so ultimately I decided to go for Medane's Ring to absorb ice, and then the Black Hood to reduce the other 3 elements by 50%. I felt like that was a good distribution because I covered like the 4 major elements. I quite literally ignored Earth, even though I was facing the Earth Guardian. But I felt like based on what I'd seen so far of the 2 battles, as long as I covered those 4 and I had 1 chance to absorb, it might be a good option. So let's head in for the next attempt and see how we did against Earth Guardian this time. Now, you know how these things go. What do you think is going to be the first element we're going to see in this fight, now that I've prepared for all of the other elements? If you had said Earth, you would be right. We literally had 2 fights against it. This guy did like 8 attacks, 10 attacks, and it didn't use a single Earth attack. Of course now it did. Anyway, I thought to myself, okay, it's big damage, but it's not horrific damage. I still think it's not going to use Earthquake that frequently. And the good news is that it pushed us to trance immediately. So I thought, okay, let's push past this and keep going. So you could have still equipped the Gaia gear here. It would have been a good idea. But since I didn't see a single Earth attack, I thought, you know what, screw it. Let's keep the power vest on for maximum power. But if I needed another attempt, I would obviously go for Gaia gear here. Now, thankfully, it did use Blizzaga, so this is good RNG here. This is the 1 element I can absorb, and a nice 1,500 there. Unfortunately, it would have been nice if Zidane absorbed it, because he's already pretty low on HP here. But that was a very clutch dodge there. And that's good damage from Quina. Quina's just like, the RNG factor is so big there. Basically, if you get the right RNG, they do as much damage as Zidane in trance almost. That's the difference. Thundaga comes in. I can reduce this by 50%, but is it enough? Just about. So the Black Hood doing a great job there. Another big damage from Quina. So they're really putting in big numbers here. But unfortunately, Earthquake happened a second time. So yes, that's just the way that these games go. They're always trolling you with that kind of stuff. I promise you, if I had just protected against Earth for this one again, you wouldn't have seen those Earthquakes. That's just how they do it. I don't know if the game's smart enough to know if like it can read which elements you protect against and it shuffles its RNG accordingly. I didn't look that deeply into the mechanics, but whatever the case may be, we did enough damage early on with a combination of the trance from Zidane and some nice RNG from Quina where they did really big damage. And so thankfully, we managed to pull through. And so with that, we were able to make it past the Earth Shrine and continue on. Now from here, once again, it's story time. What the Jagged Guide does say for anybody that wants to do this type of challenge, you've seen there that the Black Hood ended up being very useful. And there's a little section here where Jagged says you should make sure to pick up the following weapons and armors which teach abilities as you cannot purchase them later on in the game. And of these, the Black Hood is in there. So apparently this point in the story is the last chance you have to buy the Black Hood. So if you continue any further forward, you might not be able to have the chance to buy it again. So do watch out for that. Also, the Octagon Rod, you saw that did a massive job, is why Vivi was able to solo the Red Dragon, which was really awesome. And so there's a few things here that you should definitely pay attention to and make sure you do like your last bits of shopping and make sure you cover everybody. So like for example the Black Hood, I think there's literally 5 party members that can wear them, and so having enough to cover everybody in case the party splits up and that kind of thing is definitely going to be useful. But for me, what I also wanted to do for a short time is to bring Freya up to speed. So I mentioned this earlier, but she is really low level compared to the rest of the party. And what this game does like to do is, because you have quite a big party, is to split them up quite often. And I thought to myself, if I end up with a duo that features Freya and one other character who's pretty weak in terms of their attack, I could find myself in big trouble because Freya is very low level. Like at this particular stage, she's 21 levels below Zidane, and that's a pretty big deal. And so I thought to myself, let me spend a little bit of time with Zidane Freya, Garnet, and Aiko, basically like our two weakest physical attackers, plus our lowest level physical attacker who should be pretty high level, which is Freya. And I spent a little bit of time just kind of exploring in the world and trying to find a couple of spots where I could fight random encounters relatively easily and get some good experience points for it. So you're going to see some of this stuff in the background. I explored some areas like Esto Gaza, near Oilver, near Daguerreo, which was a mistake because you face the big dragon there, which is way too powerful for us. But it was a little bit of experimenting, and in general, thankfully, enemies drop enough gil that these like farming loops are still sustainable. So you can basically still buy like high potions, you can buy tents, and when you're running low on health, you can still just use those to heal. There's probably even better ways, like there's a few springs where you can go and recover your HP and MP. But since they're nearer to the early areas of the game, where the random encounters like near them don't give you much experience, I didn't want to do too much back and forth, and so I thought to myself, it's just not worth doing. So those were the main things I did. One was to increase the levels and power of Freya, Aiko, and Garnet for the difficult battles ahead. And two was to make sure I did my final bits of shopping. So like for example, the power vest is at this stage far and away the best item that I can use for strength for the body piece. And I only had 2 of them. So I wanted to make sure I had enough for everybody moving forward. And so I would say I spent maybe about half an hour tops, like 25 to 30 minutes on speed up doing all of this stuff. And a final bit of exploring around and seeing if there's anything that I was missing at this stage. And after all of that, I was basically ready to move forward to Shimmering Island / Terra. So I'm going to join you guys for that part of the story, where things of course start to get a bit more deep and serious. So for this part of the game, once again, there's going to be a lot of dialogue, a lot of exploring. This is of course the part of the game where Zidane starts to learn more about his ancestry, where he comes from, who he is, what he is. You meet Garland, and all of those kind of things happen. In terms of equipment and things to find, there are a couple of things here while moving around. For example, there's stuff like the dragon wrist that you can find. But in general, like there's nothing too crazy here that you can pick up that's going to make a massive difference in the run. As much as Terra is for me one of the coolest parts of the game, I love the soundtrack here, I love the aesthetic, I love the story revelations, all of that stuff. We are going to bypass a decent chunk of what happens in Terra. But what we are going to do, of course, is have a look at some of the random encounters. And the first one I encountered was actually these guys, the movers, which I remember from Final Fantasy VII, most recently before this. Now, you're seeing the damage here is absolutely beastly, but these guys still seem to be holding firm here. We've done a lot of damage, but we've only taken out one of the 3 so far. But that rune blade from Steiner is doing a lot of work here, so I picked that one up before continuing this part of the story. And Amara continues to get picked on a lot with this elemental damage, and he takes 1,200 damage. So at this stage, like any kind of elemental that you're hit with, if you don't have the mitigating kind of equipment, you are taking 4-digit damage. It's pretty significant. Now the virus combo is nasty because it stops you getting experience points, and so Steiner got hit with it twice. We had 2 encounters against these guys, and both times Steiner was the one that was hit with virus, and so he couldn't get any experience either time. But they do offer definitely nice experience. 7,900 for the 3 of them, and some gil too. So as I'm saying, the fact that obviously we're this late into the game, enemies are giving you a lot of experience points, so any kind of deficiencies we have in our level, I'm hoping we're going to continue to kind of move along and keep up with the game. So as we move along here, a little bit more kind of exploration. We can find things like, as I said, the dragon wrist. There's also something called Minerva's plate that you can find. At this stage, we're starting to see things that reduce stuff like shadow damage. I don't know exactly what shadow damage is at this point. I can't really tell, but the more things we have to cover basically any kind of element or kind of magic type, obviously it's going to stand us in good stead. Now, as we continue on through Terra, you're going to have the opportunity to visit a shop, and this shop is going to contain some very high-level stuff. Most of these are of a level that we've not been able to access up until this point, and it's all very expensive. So this is really going to push your gil to the limit. If you haven't been making use of like the cotton robe synthesis trick and you don't already have, say, I don't know, an extra 100, 200,000 gil lying around before you even start this bit, then this could be a bit of a problem because there's lots of really useful stuff here. The first of which is the Orichalcon. I have no idea how to pronounce this thing, but it costs 17,000 gil. But it's one of those where in an attack-only challenge, where the attack stat itself is so important, you gotta have it. And so I made sure to pick that one up. Also, you can pick up the Avenger for Amarant, which is going to be obviously a useful weapon, very powerful. We have the Defender for Steiner, which is a great sword because not only is it attack power 65, the highest of anything that we have, it also halves ice and thunder damage. So anything where the weapon itself does the elemental protection, and of course we already saw it play out in a big way with Vivi earlier. So we can pick up the Defender. We can also get the Holy Lance for Freya, which has an attack power of 62, definitely useful. We also have the Adamant Hat, which can nullify thunder damage, so might be useful. And at the end of the day, anything you pick up this late into the game, it's going to have much better like base stats anyway. So if we have something else, for example, like a different hat that can also negate or nullify thunder damage, it's probably going to have lower magic defense or defense alongside it. So the Adamant Hat, definitely a nice one to pick up as well. We also have the Platinum Helm, which can halve ice damage while having a good magic defense stat. And finally, we have the Platina Armor, which can nullify ice damage. Those are generally really nice pickups, but do require quite a lot of gil to be able to get. So in terms of whether you're able to buy all of them or not, it depends kind of how much preparation you've done up until this point, and whether or not you're willing to grind a little bit for gil to try and get everything. But I think especially those weapons and probably the Adamant Hat and the Platinum Armor, they're probably the most important, I think. As you continue on, you also get a chance to meet Stiltskin again, and we are starting to close in on basically meeting him enough times and buying everything that he has to get all of the rewards possible from him. So for 2,222 gil, you can pick up a diamond, an ether, and an elixir as well. In the background, you're continuing to see random encounters. In general, like, yes, of course, they are quite dangerous, but nothing that's going to cause me any game overs at this stage. I did switch Steiner to the Bloodsword again because I wanted to see if that was going to be enough to sort of keep him without needing to heal. And so that's generally how I did it. And it seemed to be working pretty well. Like, everybody else is doing enough damage that Steiner doing maybe half the damage he normally would, or even a third, is still not too much of a problem. So I thought like having the extra ability to heal was probably still worth it. Now along the way we did encounter this enemy, which can sometimes be a problematic one in Final Fantasy history, and immediately we see an issue. Steiner had the Bloodsword and this guy is classed as an undead, and so yeah, Steiner ends up damaging himself every time he uses the Bloodsword, but as a result of the challenge, like obviously there's nothing he can do about it. We're stuck with that weapon and we are forced to attack. So Steiner is basically forced to kill himself while healing the enemy. So this is great. I did say that like the random encounters didn't cause too much trouble, but Steiner having the Bloodsword here really messed things up pretty badly. It's funny because I literally fought this guy recently in Final Fantasy VII Rebirth in the brutal challenges, and there it also had a drain move that was pretty nasty. But there you go, Steiner kills himself. And we got stuff like Hypnotize, puts him to sleep. So out of nowhere, I was generally pretty much chilling, I was pretty comfortable, and then suddenly things got very annoying against this guy. Another Absorb comes in. And it's too much damage. So he has healed back like thousands. Like Steiner's probably, I think Steiner hit him like 3 times. It's like 2,000. 2 absorbs. There was just no way. Let's see. Roulette ended up on itself, but because it's like undead, it doesn't die as a result. Survived the absorb, but 1,400 damage taken. And it was too much. So yeah, I did get a game over in Terra, mostly as a result of Steiner having the Bloodsword instead of the Rune Blade. So after this little accident here, I decided to swap the Bloodsword back out and just deal with the potential extra healing I needed to do as a result. Because it just wasn't worth taking a risk encountering those guys and running into trouble. And I think this is where I'm going to end this particular episode, because obviously once we get to Pandemonium, there's going to be a few more battles, and in general things are really going to start to ramp up. Now, depending on how difficult things are going to get and what I need to do for basically the finale of the game, we might need to have like an episode dedicated to just like one boss or only 2 bosses. So we've been pretty dense at this up until this point, and we've got a lot done per episode. But the last episode was already 1 hour and 6 minutes long, and I'm trying to not overdo it too much, so I can have hopefully enough left over for episode 7 and wrap everything up nicely for this particular series. So things again continue to be relatively easy, nothing that's proving a massive roadblock. Yes, some bosses, if you don't have the right preparation, you might need another attempt or 2 to get through, but we've not encountered anything that's just been like particularly impossible or that's required some kind of big brain strategy to be able to get through. But this game can get quite brutal near the end. I mean, obviously flashbacks of Necron coming out of nowhere at the end and being potentially very difficult, and so this challenge is still nowhere near done. Just because we've made it okay up until this point, all it takes is one fight to completely change everything. So for now, we're still going okay, but stay tuned to find out how we're going to do for the final part of the game, and I will join you in the next episode in Pandemonium. So thank you all for watching. As always, early access is available on Patreon, and it supports series like this in a huge way, and I always appreciate it massively when people sign up for the Patreon to show some extra support for the content. I will see you guys soon for episode 7. Thank you all for watching. Take care.